Far Cry. The king of open world shooters, or a worn out franchise that has overstayed its welcome? The truth is probably a bit of both, with a tiny bit more of the latter. Be that as it may, I love these games. They are one of my comfort franchises. No matter how crazy the world of AAA gaming might get, I know that if I want to, I can just cause a ton of mayhem in a new setting with familiar gameplay every year or two. Especially because I usually play these games around the time the next one is released. There is simply something reassuring about seeing these games on sale for like $15 and knowing exactly what I'm gonna get each time. Lately, I've been getting nostalgic. And nostalgia paired up with the lack of disposable income for gaming is a pretty potent mix that results in playing a lot of old games. Today, I'm doing Far Cry, the first one, the only one not developed by Ubisoft. Let's start with the story, which will obviously include spoilers, so be advised. Far Cry 1 tells the story of Jack Garber, an ex-military funny guy who is hired by alleged journalist Valerie Constantine to secretly take her to an uncharted island in the South Pacific. Out of nowhere, Jack's boat blows up, leaving him stranded and surrounded by mercenaries, with Valerie nowhere to be found. While evading his pursuers, Jack finds a comms device from which emanates the sweet voice of Doyle, a guy who, while clearly trying to be helpful, also seems to know way more than he lets on. With Doyle's guidance, Jack goes around the island trying to find Valerie, figure out what's going on, all the while wreaking all kinds of havoc. Eventually discovering the owners of the island and benefactors of the mercenaries, Krieger Corp, led by Dr. Krieger.
But a measure of the future of mankind depends on the success of my research here. I will not fail my destiny.
As is customary when a German man passionately speaks to the masses from a podium, everything was perfectly fine, and Jack, Valerie and Doyle enjoyed a relaxing holiday in paradise. I'm kidding, of course. The island is the place where Krieger Corp comes to commit their crimes against humanity, namely the development of a mutagen that changes the DNA of living things, enhancing their abilities. Their genetic meddling results in the Trigens, deformed apes that are as stable as they are beautiful. Krieger also adds bits of his own DNA into the mix in hopes that they will recognize him as a sort of alpha and follow his commands. Jack finally catches up with Valerie as she is being taken away on a helicopter, out of which they are forced to bail out of in the funniest scene in the game.
The pilot's dead. Jump!
Once they are safe ashore, Valerie reveals that both she and Doyle work for the CIA, and have been keeping tabs on Krieger and his shady experiments. Not content with creating super beasts, Krieger also makes super soldiers, which proceed to revolt and massacre the mercs. Some more shenanigans ensue, chief among them Jack killing the leader of the mercenaries, and discovering that Krieger has a tactical nuke at hand, to cover his tracks in case he needs to rush out. Valerie decides the best course of action is to detonate the nuke preemptively to ensure the explosion is contained where it's located and Krieger cannot destroy the evidence of his handiwork. Doyle warns them that setting off the nuke might cause the mutagen to spread and infect them, advising them to inject an antidote as a precaution. They do so and arm the nuke. Cool guys don't look at explosions, but they do get knocked out by them. While unconscious, they are captured by Krieger, who reveals he has gone full bananas and wants the Trigens to take over the world as the next step of human evolution. Jack is then, once again, unceremoniously invited to leave the transport method he's in.
Good luck.
Jack survives, realizing along the way that they are infected after all, and the only solution is a cure Krieger has developed. He makes his way to the guy's evil volcano vase, sees that Krieger has taken some steroids, they fight, Krieger loses, and with his final breath tells Jack he and Valerie can't have been infected by air, as the pathogen is administered strictly intravenously. Here we get the final twist of the game. As it turns out, Doyle has been planning to keep the pathogen for himself and sell it to the highest bidder. Jack takes a not looking so good Valerie to a safe place and proceeds to go after Doyle. One very annoyingly difficult trip through the volcanic crater later, Jack is able to give Doyle a piece of his mind by blowing up his.
You can't change the future.
Probably not, but I can make sure you're not a part of it. Stupid bastard.
Our protagonist runs away from the volcano, which is erupting because of course it is, goes back to Valerie, pulls a cure out of his ass and administers it. They both escape the island, with the final shot being of Valerie's findings, dubbed Project Far Cry. That's the story. It's terrible. I love it. I found it to be very enjoyable in a silly way. Out of all the dated sound effects, gameplay mechanics and visuals, it was the narrative that screamed product of its time the loudest to me. It's the video game equivalent of a cheesy action movie from the 80s. It's got it all. smart-ass protagonist just trying to leave his violent past behind and failing to do so, attractive female companion complete with all kinds of tensions, a cartoonish villain with a goofy world domination plan, hordes of henchmen with terrible dialogue who are also, for some reason, Italian.
How come we don't use satellites?
We can't use satellites because we don't want anyone to know what we're doing here. Why do you think we have the radio shielding devices?
Oh, I get it.
Nonsensical set pieces, and of course, one-liners.
I'm coming for you, buddy.
Jack in particular was a highlight for me. Not in any likable way, as I found him as charming as sandpaper, but rather as a refreshing change of pace from modern-day protagonists. There is no need to imbue him with any other trait aside from determination and being funny in situations where normal people will be having a panic attack.
Let's prep the nuke, and then we can go grab the serum.
What is this? A bad spy movie?
As much as I love how gamers have come to expect and even demand realism from the characters we inhabit, sometimes all you need is a dumbass with a very particular set of skills. Now, let's talk about the game a bit. I found Far Cry to be a very interesting experience, mainly because as a whole I would say it has aged like fine wine, while separately each individual part felt a bit out of date. For example, the game is now almost 20 years old and it looks the part. However, the visual design of the archipelago is really good and manages to create that timeless feel some games have. You can tell this game made some computer sweat back in the day. Not all parts of the presentation are top notch, however, interiors are a mixed bag with some of them looking like shit, and the sound effects and soundtrack leave much to be desired. The game is unforgiving in that way old shooters can be. There is no such thing as regenerating health, and enemy behavior is very realistic. They communicate, call for backup, try to flank you, and can drop you real quick if you're not careful. They can even go prone and scare the crap out of you. This is normal difficulty, which in the case of Far Cry seemingly means the normal amount of bullets it takes to kill someone in real life. There is a lot of jank attached to your foes, but with them being so deadly most of the time, I learned to appreciate the moments where I caught them with their pants down. Far Cry is a sandbox shooter, that is not a linear shooter and not an open world shooter, more like a comfy in between. There are at least two different approaches to most situations in the game, and even in the more closed-in environments where you're constrained by level design, there is always a vent to crawl through or a different path you can take. Not everything has to be taking danger head on. Unless you want to, of course. At first I took this approach and went in guns blazing. I'm not the most creative player there is, and I tend not to enjoy stealth in games where doing this is an option. I use stealth as a tool like any other, using binoculars before rushing in to scout enemies, see where they are, see if there's a sniper or a guy with a rocket launcher. Those are the worst. They have very little self-preservation instinct. I tried to clear areas without being seen several times and gave up each one of them. You might be a more patient or skilled person than I am and can do it all sneaky beaky like, but to me it all just felt a bit random.
You see that?
One thing that did not feel random was the guns. Shooting people in this game feels really good. Perhaps the sound work of the weapons is a little dated, but some good old ragdolls more than make up for it. You can have the best animations in the world, but nothing will ever beat humanoid enemies going limp when shot. Bonus points for having bullet decals on the bodies. Another thing I liked, and this is something that was more common in older shooters, is that they use weird guns. When was the last time you played a game and the semi-shotgun wasn't a Vanelli M4 or a Spas 12 but rather a Pancor jackhammer?
Reverse the main flow.
Wait, I gotta do that again. Even crazier, they have the X29. I genuinely don't think I've ever used this gun in any game before this one. Gameplay-wise, there are two things I really did not enjoy. One of them being the movement. Far Cry uses Counter-Strike movement logic. Hold big heavy things, move slow. Hold small light things, move fast. I hate this. It works fine in CS, but in a sandbox shooter things can get rough. Especially in vehicle sections if you happen to misplace your ride. You can sprint, but it isn't a very generous sprint. I think the idea is that it's meant to be used in firefights to dash for cover. In any case, the end result is that movement is fine during combat, but can be annoying in the downtime. I ended up keeping the pistol at all times. You sacrifice a weapon slot, but it's the weapon you move fastest with. Besides, it's a Desert Eagle, why wouldn't you want to keep it?
You see something?
Taking care of your car in the larger areas is easier said than done. Vehicles have a health bar and there is no repairing them. All the vehicle repairs were stolen by the next game. Also, do not use the third-person vehicle camera. Another thing I really disliked are the Trigens. It's mostly fine when they are mindless brutes that jump at you, but once they get guns they become rather annoying to fight. The big ones are tanky and the small ones are deadly accurate. Nothing about fighting the Trigens in the game can be considered an upgrade over fighting the mercenaries. The final section of the game in particular was very hard, and I ended up tackling it in a very different way from the rest of the game. I even had to look up a walkthrough. I honestly can't remember when was the last time I did that. Though the added difficulty ended up being enjoyable to me in a nostalgic way, there is no denying that the fun factor of the game drops substantially in the latter half. It's kind of funny to think that this issue is shared with Crytek's next game. I bet if you ask people what they loved about the original Crysis, you'll find few of them saying the big alien squid machines. Also, I just want to point out real quick that these two games are only 3 years apart. One final thing to note is that at least on Steam, the latest version you get when you purchase the game comes broken. At first I thought the game was exceptionally hard, and then realized that enemies can see you through walls. They can even shoot you through some surfaces like tents. There is a fan patch you can download that addresses this and some other issues. Anyway, that was the first Far Cry in a nutshell. This is one of a couple of games in this franchise that I did not play back in the day, and I was quite apprehensive to the idea of playing it for the first time almost 2 decades later. Some people have the ability to play games and immerse themselves in whatever time it was released, ignoring outdated game mechanics, story and graphics. I am not one of those people, so I was expecting the experience of the first game to be quite the boring ordeal. I am very pleased to be proven wrong. This is some fine old school FPS action that really takes me back to childhood years, when games were simpler and I had no idea how they were made, so it all felt kinda like magic. I didn't know what textures were, what collision did, no AI triggers or script, just my prepubescent self and the game. The more I played it, the more I regretted not giving it a go back in the day, as this would have easily been one of my favorites had I experienced it brand new, though my surely potato PC would have had something to say about that. If you already played it, then you know it's good. If like me you haven't, I recommend giving it a go if you feel nostalgic for a time with less worries and more time that you knew what to do with. My idea for these videos is to slowly replay entire franchises, so depending on when you are watching this, there may or may not be a second part to this. Thank you very much for watching, consider liking and subscribing for more of these and other stuff. I have to go now. I am having a rough time at the moment.